The battle for the Arctic, the next global flashpoint. Imagine a place where the sun barely rises for half the year, where temperatures can kill exposed skin in minutes, and where the silence is broken only by cracking ice sheets the size of countries. Sounds like the set of a survival documentary, right? Now imagine that same frozen wasteland as the hottest piece of real estate on Earth. Welcome to the Arctic, the world's new obsession, and possibly the stage for the 21st century's ugliest tug-of-war. Here's the dirty secret no one tells you in glossy climate reports. The Arctic is melting, and every meter of disappearing ice is opening up a vault of untapped wealth. Oil, gas, rare earth minerals, shipping routes that could shave thousands of miles off global trade. It's as if nature accidentally left the keys to a treasure chest on the kitchen counter, and now every major power is sprinting to grab them. On paper, it looks like a frozen version of Monopoly. Russia planting flags under the sea, China calling itself a near-Arctic state, whatever that means. And the United States suddenly remembering Alaska isn't just about polar bears. Add NATO patrols, Canadian claims, and a few Nordic countries who've quietly realized their backyard might turn into a geopolitical casino. And you've got yourself a board game where the dice are nuclear submarines. Why should you care? Because history doesn't repeat itself. It just puts on a winter coat. Every so-called new frontier humanity has discovered, the Americas, Africa, the Middle East, has been sold as a land of opportunity. In reality, it was always a land of conflict. The Arctic is no different. The only question is, will this be the coldest gold rush in history, or the spark that ignites World War III? Stay until the end, because what you're about to see isn't just about ice and oil. It's about how power, greed, and survival collide at the top of the world. And once you realize what's really at stake, you'll never look at a globe the same way again. So, who exactly owns the Arctic? Simple answer, no one. Complicated answer, everyone who can shout loud enough, send warships, or hire lawyers with very expensive pens. Technically, international law says the Arctic is managed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Each country gets rights to resources within 200 nautical miles off their coast, called the Exclusive Economic Zone. Beyond that, it's a free-for-all, with claims, counterclaims, and the occasional symbolic stunt, like Russia literally planting a flag on the seafloor in 2007. Here's where it gets spicy. Beneath that ice lies 13% of the world's undiscovered oil, and 30% of its natural gas reserves, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. That's trillions of dollars sitting under frozen waves. For Russia, which already gets around 40% of its budget revenue from oil and gas, this isn't just a jackpot, it's survival. No wonder Moscow has been building Arctic military bases like they're setting up ice-themed Starbucks. Meanwhile, the United States pretends it's only mildly interested, until someone mentions shipping lanes. The Northern Sea Route, hugging Russia's coast, can cut the trip from Europe to Asia by almost 40% compared to the Suez Canal. That's like saving weeks in delivery time for oil tankers and container ships. Translation: billions of dollars in global trade efficiency. Suddenly, Alaska doesn't look like America's forgotten snowy cousin. It looks like a front-row seat to the future of shipping. Climate change is the enabler. Every summer, Arctic sea ice shrinks to record lows. What's catastrophic for polar bears is a business opportunity for humans. Less ice means easier drilling, faster shipping, and more cash. Think of it as climate disaster capitalism, turning melting glaciers into dividends. But while the US and Russia flex, another player has quietly slipped into the game. One that technically doesn't belong anywhere near the Arctic. Guess who? While Russia and the US lock eyes across the ice, another contender sneaks in through the back door. China, a country that geographically speaking is about as close to the North Pole as Brazil is to snow leopards, suddenly calls itself a near-Arctic state. That's like me calling myself a near-billionaire because I once walked past a Ferrari dealership. Still, Beijing plays the long game. It's building icebreaker ships, funding polar research stations, and slipping into Arctic councils with the charm of an uninvited dinner guest who also happens to bring a suitcase full of cash. Why? Because the Arctic isn't just about oil or gas, it's about rare earth minerals. And if you control the supply of those, you control the guts of modern technology. Smartphones, batteries, fighter jets, even those sleek Teslas coasting down California highways. To make matters worse, China is teaming up with Russia. Joint ventures for oil exploration, shared infrastructure projects, whispers of military cooperation. It's the geopolitical equivalent of two kids who don't really like each other suddenly deciding they hate you more. And when Beijing waves money around in Greenland or invests in ports in Iceland, it doesn't look like innocent science. It looks like a chessboard where the pawns are frozen islands and the queens are liquefied natural gas tankers. Of course, NATO isn't blind. Canadian fighter jets shadow Russian bombers. Norwegian patrols circle like wary guard dogs. The USC ramps up its Arctic training exercises, pretending it's about search and rescue, as if they're all preparing to save lost hikers instead of guarding trillion-dollar oil rigs. The irony? Everyone's waving the flag of peaceful scientific exploration, but when you count the submarines under the ice, the military outposts rising in the snow, and the billions poured into dual-use technology, the Arctic looks less like a science fair and more like the Cold War on ice, just waiting for one slip to crack it open. Europe, meanwhile, finds itself in an awkward position. Countries like Norway, Denmark, and Iceland are technically small players, but thanks to geography, they're sitting on prime Arctic real estate. Norway alone controls vast chunks of the Barents Sea, and every time it drills for natural gas, Brussels silently cheers. Because Europe's energy addiction doesn't care if the supplier is a friendly fjord or a frosty dictatorship. Denmark has Greenland, which isn't just a giant block of ice. It's a giant block of strategic leverage. When the United States literally tried to buy Greenland in 2019, everyone laughed. But buried under that ice sheet are minerals, and surrounding it are potential naval choke points. Owning Greenland isn't a punchline. It's owning a vault that guards the North Atlantic. And then there's Canada, often overlooked but holding the keys to the Northwest Passage, a route that could rival Russia's Northern Sea route. Canada insists the passage is internal waters. The US insists it's an international highway. Translation: we'll keep arguing until someone sails a destroyer through it and dares the other to shoot first. On paper, the Arctic Council exists to keep things civil. It includes 8 Arctic states and a bunch of observers, with the goal of promoting cooperation and avoiding conflict. Lovely mission statement. But here's the reality. When trillions in resources are up for grabs, treaties turn into polite wallpaper. After all, the Svalbard Treaty of 1920 was supposed to guarantee peaceful use of the islands. Yet countries constantly argue over who gets to mine, fish, or patrol the area. The math is brutal. By 2040, summer ice could disappear almost entirely. That means new shipping routes worth hundreds of billions annually, oil and gas reserves enough to fuel the world for decades, and military access that could shift the balance of power. Imagine the Arctic not as a frozen desert, but as a new Panama Canal, except instead of engineers cutting it open, climate change is melting it for free. The danger? History suggests that when the pie grows, the knives come out. The Arctic isn't just turning into a business hub, it's morphing into a forward operating battlefield. Russia has already built or refurbished more than 50 military outposts above the Arctic Circle, complete with radar stations, missile systems, and runways long enough to handle nuclear-capable bombers. They call it defensive sovereignty. Everyone else calls it what it is: a flex. The United States, not to be outdone, has been running annual war games in Alaska, simulating cold weather combat and practicing how to deploy troops on frozen terrain. NATO allies join in too, with thousands of soldiers rehearsing what it might look like if an accidental encounter with Russian forces spiraled out of control. Think of it as a rehearsal for a play no one admits they're actually going to stage. Beneath the ice, it gets even more surreal. Nuclear submarines lurk in the Arctic Ocean, slipping under ice sheets like sharks under frosted glass. In 2021, Russia staged a stunt where 3 nuclear subs simultaneously surfaced through Arctic ice. A not-so-subtle reminder that, yes, they could launch world-ending firepower from the middle of nowhere. The US responds with its own under-ice patrols, while Britain and Norway quietly expand their fleets. It's the geopolitical version of teenagers revving their engines in a quiet neighborhood. Except the engines are weapons of mass destruction. And let's not forget satellites. Whoever controls the Arctic also controls a prime slice of orbital real estate for tracking, spying, and missile defense. That's why you see investments not only in icebreakers and bases, but in dual-use satellites, marketed as tools for weather research, but conveniently capable of watching enemy fleets. On the surface, leaders keep smiling, signing statements about scientific cooperation, but the budgets tell the real story. Arctic defense spending has skyrocketed across NATO and Russia, turning the top of the planet into a militarized chessboard. And unlike the old Cold War, where Berlin was the front line, this time the front line is a sheet of ice that could vanish within a generation. So here we are, staring at a frozen desert that looks empty, but is buzzing with more ambition, paranoia, and raw greed than Wall Street on a Monday morning. The Arctic isn't just melting, it's transforming into the ultimate mirror of humanity's obsessions. Every nation calls its moves defense or science, but beneath the polite press releases lies the same truth. Whoever wins the Arctic wins a future of resources, shipping, and military leverage. Think back to that opening image. Endless white silence, ice cracking under the weight of centuries. It seemed untouched, almost sacred. Now picture it again, but this time filled with icebreakers carving scars through the sea, submarines prowling beneath, and satellites blinking from above. What was once a wilderness of survival has become a theater of power. And the irony, the very thing that makes this rush possible, climate change, is also the thing that will destabilize every nation fighting for it. As the ice vanishes, storms grow fiercer, coasts erode, and food chains collapse. The Arctic isn't just a prize, it's a warning. Humanity is racing to exploit the wound while pretending it's not bleeding. So, will the Arctic be remembered as the place where nations finally learn to cooperate over survival? Or as the frozen spark that lit the next global fire? Which side would you choose? Enjoyed it? Drop a like, share it with someone who loves this kind of talk, and let's keep pulling back the curtain on the games powerful nations don't want you to see.